Welcome to War and Untold Stories. Here, we explore the hidden side of history, the battles that shaped the world, the daring prison escapes that defied the odds, and the shocking crimes that history tried to forget. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and share your thoughts in the comments. The French Revolution was one of the most dramatic periods in human history. It is a story of liberty and oppression, of equality and inequality, of life and death, of courage and cowardice, of hope and despair. And it is a story that is still being written today. This is the French Revolution. France in the late 18th century was a powder keg waiting to explode. The French monarchy had been weakened by decades of war and financial mismanagement. The economy was in sharp decline, and the people were getting poorer. At the same time, the ideas of the Enlightenment were spreading across France, calling for liberty, equality, and democracy. The American Revolution was also an inspiration for the French people who wanted to overthrow their own monarchy and create a new government based on the principles of the Enlightenment. France was divided into three social classes, or estates. The first estate consisted of the clergy, while the second estate was made up of the nobility. Both of these groups enjoyed great privilege and power, while the third estate, which made up 98% of the population, bore the brunt of the taxes and had little voice in government. The growing discontent among the third estate would eventually lead to the French Revolution. On July 14, 1789, a crowd of Parisians stormed the Bastille, a royal prison that had become a symbol of the monarchy's absolute power. The storming of the Bastille is seen as the start of the French Revolution, but the revolution was not over yet. There was still a long way to go before liberty, equality, and democracy were achieved. In October 1789, women from Paris marched to the Palace of Versailles to demand that the king move the royal family to Paris. The women were led by two figures, Madame de Girondin and Mademoiselle de Vergennes. They had both lost sons during the French Revolution, and they wanted revenge against the king and his family. The march was a success, and the royal family was forced to move to Paris. But this was just another example of how the French Revolution was becoming more radical by the day. The French Revolution was a complex and multifaceted event that cannot be fully explained in just 100 seconds. It was a time of great upheaval and change in France and Europe as a whole. If you want to learn more about the French Revolution, be sure to check out our full series. The French Revolution was a major turning point in European history. It ended the absolute monarchy in France and established the country as a republic. The revolution also inspired other movements for liberty and democracy across Europe and around the world. Today, we remember the French Revolution as a time when the people rose up against tyranny and won. We celebrate the courage of the French citizens who fought for their rights and freedoms, and we honor the memory of those who died in the struggle. The French Revolution began with the best of intentions, but it soon turned into a nightmare. The guillotine, a machine designed to carry out swift and humane executions, became a symbol of the revolution's brutality. The streets of Paris ran red with the blood of aristocrats and clergy who were accused of treason. But the revolution didn't stop there. The French people were not satisfied with just overthrowing the monarchy. They wanted to create a new kind of government, one that was based on the principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity. They also wanted to get rid of the old social order and create a society where everyone was equal. But this was easier said than done. The French Revolution was a long and bloody affair that lasted for years. But in the end, it was worth it because it created a new France and a new Europe. The French Revolution was one of the most important events in world history. It changed the way we think about government and society, and it inspired other revolutions around the world. If you want to learn more about the French Revolution, stay tuned for more updates. The French Revolution was a time of great turmoil and change in France and Europe. It began in 1789 with the storming of the Bastille and ended in 1799 with the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte. The revolution saw the overthrow of the monarchy and the establishment of a republic. It was also a time of great violence and bloodshed, with thousands of people being executed by the guillotine. One of the most radical phases of the French Revolution was the Reign of Terror, which lasted from 1793 to 1794. During this time, the revolutionary government, led by Maximilien Robespierre, sought to eliminate all enemies of the revolution, real or imagined. Thousands of people were arrested and executed during the Reign of Terror, including many members of the aristocracy and clergy, but also ordinary citizens who were suspected of being disloyal. Robespierre himself was eventually overthrown and executed in 1794, but the Reign of Terror left a lasting legacy of fear and suspicion in France. Another important figure during the French Revolution was Georges Danton. Danton was a lawyer and politician who played a key role in the early stages of the revolution. He was one of the leaders of the Cordeliers Club, a radical political group that advocated for the overthrow of the monarchy and the establishment of a republic. Danton was a skilled orator, and he used his talents to defend the rights of the common people and attack the privileges of the nobility and clergy. He was also a leading member of the Committee of Public Safety, which was a government body that was established to protect the revolution from its enemies. However, Danton's radicalism made him enemies, and he was eventually arrested and executed in 1794 during the Reign of Terror. Despite the violence and upheaval, the French Revolution had a profound impact on the course of European history. It ended the feudal system and the absolute monarchy in France and established the country as a republic. It also inspired other revolutions and independence movements around the world. The French Revolution was a complex and multifaceted event that cannot be fully understood in just 100 seconds. But hopefully, this overview has given you a sense of the scope and significance of this pivotal moment in world history. If you want to learn more about the French Revolution, be sure to stay tuned for more updates. France in 1789 was a tinderbox ready to ignite. The nation was saddled with debt from years of extravagant spending by the royal court and the American Revolution. The common people, or the Third Estate, were fed up with the privileges enjoyed by the nobility and clergy, who made up the First and Second Estates respectively. They had little voice in government and were subject to a heavy tax burden. The widespread adoption of Enlightenment ideas, which emphasized reason, individualism, and democracy, further fueled discontent. When Louis XVI called a meeting of the Estates General, a representative body comprising members from each of the three estates, to address the financial crisis, the Third Estate demanded that votes be taken by head, rather than by estate, which would have given them more power. When this request was denied, the Third Estate walked out and formed their own National Assembly, vowing to create a constitution. On June 1789, with the threat of an impending financial crisis and mounting pressure from the National Assembly, King Louis XVI had no choice but to accept the tennis court oath. This marked the official start of the French Revolution. On July 14, 1789, a group of Parisians stormed the Bastille, a royal prison that had come to symbolize the oppression of the people by the monarchy. This event is now seen as the start of the French Revolution. As news of the Bastille's fall spread, people across France rose up against the monarchy. In some areas, they stormed and destroyed aristocratic homes, while in others, they established their own militias to defend their communities. The king's troops were unable to put down the revolts, and so he was forced to flee Paris with his family. On October 5, 1789, thousands of Parisian women marched to Versailles to demand that the royal family return to Paris. The women were led by two notable figures, Madame de Girondin and Mademoiselle de Vergennes, whose sons had died during the storming of the Bastille. The royal family arrived back in Paris 3 days later under the escort of a large force of armed citizens. Once back in Paris, the king was forced to accept the new constitution, which established France as a constitutional monarchy with a legislative assembly elected by the people. The constitution also abolished the feudal system, and with it, the privileges of the nobility and clergy. Despite these reforms, some of the revolutionaries were not satisfied. They wanted to go further and create a republic rather than a constitutional monarchy. These radicals were eventually successful, and in 1792, the monarchy was abolished and France became a republic. The French Revolution had begun. France's slide into chaos and violence didn't end with the fall of the monarchy. The revolution entered a radical phase, known as the Reign of Terror, in 1793, during which thousands of suspected enemies of the revolution were executed by guillotine. Power was seized by a group of radical politicians led by Maximilien Robespierre, who used the revolutionary court as a tool to eliminate opposition. This period of violence and instability lasted until 1794, when Robespierre was overthrown and executed. Following the Reign of Terror, France experienced a period of relative calm and stability under the Directory, a five-man executive body established by the new Constitution of 1795, but this stability was short-lived, and in 1799, Napoleon Bonaparte, a young general who had risen to prominence during the Revolution, staged a coup d'état and established himself as first consul of France. While the Revolution had failed to achieve its goals of liberty, equality, and fraternity, it did have a lasting impact on France and the world. It helped to spread Enlightenment ideas across Europe and inspired other revolutions and independence movements. The French Revolution was a watershed moment in world history, and its effects are still felt today. The French Revolution was a momentous event in world history. It marked the end of the old regime in France and Europe and gave rise to modern France and the modern world. But what were the causes and consequences of the French Revolution? And how did it change the world? What were the major events of the French Revolution? What were the causes of the French Revolution? What were the consequences of the French Revolution, and how did it change the world? The French Revolution was a complex and multifaceted event that cannot be fully explained. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us bring more untold stories to life.